The reality of the wild is far more surprising than we imagined. What if a creature born to be feared, born to be untamed, born to belong to the darkest forests on Earth, chose, after years of living wild and free, to come back? Not because she was hungry, not because she was lost, but because she remembered. What you were about to witness broke every rule, and it will break something in you too. The Cascade Mountains of Oregon rise like a cathedral the world forgot to finish. Dense Douglas fir forests climb their flanks in thick, unbroken green, so dark in places the midday sun can barely reach the ground. Black bears move through these forests like shadows with heartbeats, seen once and then gone, leaving only overturned logs and claw marks in bark to prove they were ever there. In spring, snowmelt turns every gully into a rushing silver thread. The air smells of pine resin and cold earth and something ancient. This is not a gentle landscape. It is beautiful the way a storm is beautiful, enormous and indifferent and absolutely alive. It was into this world that a logging crew found her on a Tuesday morning in late April. Barely 6 weeks old, eyes still clouded with newness, sitting in the mud beside a highway cut-through where her mother had been struck and killed overnight. She was not crying, she was not moving, she was simply waiting, with the devastating patience of something too young to understand that no one was coming back. The crew called the nearest wildlife rescue, and the nearest wildlife rescue called Raymond. Raymond was 61 years old, a former forest ranger turned wildlife rehabilitator who had spent the better part of 4 decades nursing Oregon's injured and orphaned animals back toward the wild. He drove a battered green truck and spoke quietly and never used 2 words when one would do. He had raised deer and osprey and river otters. He had never raised a bear cub, and he had certainly never planned to introduce one to Duke. Duke was a 6-year-old golden retriever, broad-shouldered and thick-coated, with the temperament of something that had decided long ago the world was mostly good. He had lived at Raymond's property his entire life, 40 acres of fenced woodland backing up against the national forest, and his response to every new arrival had been the same: a slow approach, a careful sniff, and then an expression of absolute, uncomplicated welcome. Raymond named the cub Luna. He expected Duke to be cautious. He prepared for tension. He had a separate enclosure ready, a separation plan drafted, a contingency for every reasonable outcome. What he did not have a contingency for was Duke. The moment Raymond set the cub carrier down in the yard and unlatched the door, Luna, 3 pounds of frightened black fur, tumbled out onto the grass and froze. She smelled everything at once: the trees, the mud, the strange new air of a place that was not the roadside ditch where she had spent the worst night of her life. And then Duke was there. He did not rush, he did not bark. He walked forward at a pace that could only be described as deliberate, lowered his great golden head until his nose was level with Luna's, and breathed, just breathed, in and out, warm and steady, the oldest greeting any mammal knows. Luna looked up at him. Something passed between them in that moment that no camera fully captures and no scientist fully explains. She pressed her small black nose against his and exhaled. Raymond stood at the porch railing for a long time afterwards, not going inside. The weeks that followed rewrote everything Raymond thought he knew about interspecies bonding. Luna slept curled against Duke's belly every night, one small paw hooked over his leg as if checking even in sleep that he was still there. She ate when he ate. She followed him through the yard in their morning walks like a small, clumsy shadow, stumbling over her own feet on slopes he navigated with effortless ease. Duke tolerated it all with extraordinary patience. Her needle-sharp claws on his back when she tried to climb him, her insistence on investigating his ears, her habit of sitting directly on top of him whenever something alarmed her. By summer, she was bold. She climbed the fence posts. She dismantled a bird feeder with surgical precision. She discovered that if she sat on Raymond's boots when he was trying to walk, he would stop and scratch behind her ears every single time. Raymond stopped calling it rehabilitation and started calling it what it was, a family. But Luna grew. By autumn, she was 30 pounds. By the following spring, 60. And with the growth came something Raymond had always known was coming, the pull. The unmistakable biological restlessness that takes a bear in her second year and turns her face toward the forest, toward the dark and the cold and the ancient life waiting beyond the fence line. Luna began spending hours at the perimeter, pressing her nose through the chain link, reading the wind. Raymond made the decision that every good rehabilitator eventually must. He opened the gate. She left on a Wednesday morning, without ceremony, without looking back. Duke sat at the tree line until she was gone, then turned and walked back to the porch and lay down and didn't eat much that day. Raymond sat beside him and said nothing. What was there to say? 14 months passed. The gate stayed open, as it always does at Raymond's, an invitation, not a trap. On a cold November morning, Raymond was splitting firewood when Duke stood up sharply from his spot on the porch, ears forward, body still. Raymond turned. She came out of the tree line at a slow walk, larger now, perhaps 200 pounds, her coat thick and winter black, moving with the full authority of a wild bear in her prime. She crossed the yard without hesitation. Duke walked down the porch steps. They met in the middle of the yard, the wild bear and the old dog, and repeated the only ritual they had ever needed. Luna lowered her enormous head. Duke pressed his nose against hers. She exhaled. He exhaled. Then she sat down, directly on his feet. Raymond dropped his axe. She stayed 4 hours. She inspected the bird feeder, newly replaced and once again methodically dismantled. She let Raymond approach close enough to see that she was healthy, fat for autumn forage, her eyes clear and bright and entirely her own. She was not tame, she was not domesticated, she was wild in every way a bear is supposed to be wild. She had just chosen to come home. She came back 3 more times that winter, each time the same, emerging from the tree line, crossing the yard, pressing her nose to Duke, sitting on his feet, each time leaving again on her own terms, disappearing back into the forest that was hers. Raymond told a local wildlife biologist what was happening. The biologist drove out, watched, and went very quiet for a while. Then he said, "She's not confused. She knows exactly what she is. She's just decided what she loves." Some bonds are not made by DNA. Some bonds are made by one warm body pressing against another in the dark, in the cold, in the first frightening hours of a life that almost didn't start at all. Luna lived wild and free and powerful in the forests she was born to inhabit, and when the season turned and the wind carried something familiar, she came back to the yard where a golden dog had once breathed warm and steady against her nose and told her, without a single word, that she was safe. That is not sentiment, that is not science, that is something older than both. Justice sometimes looks like this: a creature who was given nothing, given everything, and choosing in her freedom to return to the love that made her. If this story moved you the way it moved everyone who witnessed it, give this video a like, drop a comment below, and subscribe. There are more stories like Luna's waiting for you. Don't miss them.